Salmon. Pull a piece of wild salmon out of the oven and you already know something is different before it even touches your plate. The color is deeper. The fat runs invisible lines through the flesh. This is not coincidence. It is the whole point. Salmon is a fatty cold water fish, and the fat it carries is the kind that actually works in your favor. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, reduce triglyceride levels in the blood, ease inflammation in the arterial walls, and help keep the heart rhythm stable. These are not minor effects. Cardiovascular researchers consistently rank omega-3 intake as one of the most well-supported dietary interventions for heart risk reduction. The fish is typically grilled, baked, or pan-seared. The process is straightforward, but the quality of the source matters enormously. Wild-caught salmon carries significantly more omega-3 content than farmed versions that were raised on grain-heavy feed. A fillet from a fish that spent its life eating smaller marine organisms is a fundamentally different product than one raised in a pen. And your cardiovascular system notices the difference over time. Eat it twice a week and the research suggests meaningful results. Eat it occasionally from a questionable source and the benefit shrinks. That gap between the best version and the average version is wider here than most people expect. Blueberries. They look almost too small to matter. A handful of blueberries sitting next to a piece of salmon or a bowl of oats barely registers as a health decision. That perception is exactly wrong. Blueberries are dense with anthocyanins, a class of plant pigments and antioxidants responsible for their deep blue-purple color and for much of their cardiovascular impact. Anthocyanins reduce oxidative stress and lower chronic inflammation, two of the primary underlying mechanisms behind arterial damage and heart disease. Studies associate regular blueberry consumption with reduced risk of coronary artery disease, improved blood pressure, and lower LDL cholesterol levels. The process here is almost entirely passive. Blueberries do not need to be cooked or prepared in any special way. The compounds are present raw, and their bioavailability is high. What changes the equation is consistency. A decade-long study from King's College London tracking more than 3,000 adults found that people who maintained polyphenol-rich diets, with blueberries among the key sources, showed meaningfully lower predicted cardiovascular risk over time compared to those who ate them only occasionally. Frozen blueberries retain most of their anthocyanin content. A cheap bag from the supermarket delivers close to the same cardiovascular benefit as expensive fresh berries. That is a value trade-off that surprises most people who associate premium produce with premium health effects. Oats. There is a reason oats became the first food ever to receive an FDA-approved health claim for reducing the risk of heart disease. It was not marketing, it was the fiber. Oats contain a specific type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan. When this fiber moves through the digestive system, it binds to cholesterol particles, particularly LDL, the kind associated with arterial plaque buildup, and carries them out of the body before they can be absorbed. The mechanism is well documented and consistent across multiple studies. Replacing refined grain breakfast with oats over a sustained period produces measurable reductions in total cholesterol. The grain itself is minimally processed when eaten as rolled oats or steel-cut oats. It is typically cooked with water or milk, and the slow-cooked versions release beta-glucan more effectively than instant varieties that have been pre-processed into smaller flakes. That processing difference matters. The beta-glucan network in instant oats is partially disrupted, which reduces the viscosity it forms in the gut. And viscosity is exactly what makes the fiber work. Steel-cut oats take longer. They also deliver more. For people who have eaten instant packets for years and felt underwhelmed by the claimed benefits, that gap in processing quality is usually the reason. Walnuts. Most nuts are good for the heart in some way. Walnuts are not most nuts. The distinction comes down to ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3 fatty acid that walnuts contain in higher concentrations than almost any other nut. ALA is not the same as the omega-3s in fish, but the body converts a portion of it into active forms, and the anti-inflammatory effect on the cardiovascular system is consistent and well supported. Walnuts also carry significant amounts of magnesium, fiber, and L-arginine, an amino acid that helps keep arterial walls flexible and supports blood pressure regulation. The tree produces a wrinkled, brain-shaped kernel surrounded by a bitter skin. That skin is where a large share of the polyphenols concentrate. People who blanch walnuts or remove the skin to reduce bitterness are removing part of what makes them valuable. A handful per day, roughly 28 grams, appears in multiple clinical trials as the threshold at which measurable cardiovascular benefits begin to appear. Salted roasted walnuts from a snack bag are a different product. The sodium load works against blood pressure exactly as the ALA content works for it. Whether the net result still favors the heart is a conversation that tends to divide people with strong opinions. Avocado. An avocado contains more potassium than a banana. Most people who reach for a banana specifically for heart support do not know that. Avocados are a fruit, technically, botanically, but they function more like a fat source in the diet. The dominant fat is oleic acid, the same monounsaturated fat found in olive oil, and it is strongly associated with lower LDL cholesterol and improved vascular function. A 2022 study tracking long-term eating patterns found that eating at least 2 servings of avocado per week correlated with a 13% lower risk of cardiovascular disease overall and a 29% lower risk of coronary heart disease specifically. The potassium content directly supports blood pressure regulation by counteracting the effects of sodium, a mechanism that operates independently of the fat profile. One whole avocado provides roughly 28% of the recommended daily potassium intake for women. Avocado toast, guacamole, sliced on eggs. The preparation method rarely destroys the active compounds because the beneficial fats and minerals are stable across most serving contexts. What does degrade the cardiovascular value is pairing avocado with foods high in processed sodium or trans fats. The avocado itself is not the problem. What surrounds it on the plate often is. Dark chocolate. This one causes more confusion in grocery store conversations than almost any other food on this list. People want it to be a free pass. It is not, but it is also not empty. Dark chocolate made from cacao contains flavanols, a subclass of polyphenols that relax blood vessels, lower blood pressure, reduce platelet stickiness, and improve overall endothelial function. These are real, measurable effects documented in controlled trials. The issue is dose and composition. The research points toward chocolate with at least 70% cacao content, eaten in small amounts, roughly 20 to 30 grams, several times per week. Milk chocolate contains a fraction of the flavanol concentration. White chocolate contains essentially none. The dairy in milk chocolate also appears to interfere with flavanol absorption. The dilution process that makes chocolate sweeter and smoother removes the compounds that make it cardioprotective. A square of high-percentage dark chocolate eaten on its own, without milk, delivers a different cardiovascular experience than a full chocolate bar from a convenience store shelf. The flavor is less immediately comfortable. The bitterness many people find off-putting is largely the flavanol content itself. Acquired taste, legitimate benefit, the trade-off tends to split opinions sharply. Leafy greens, spinach, kale, Swiss chard, collard greens. They do not compete with each other so much as they reinforce the same cardiovascular logic from different angles. The primary active mechanism for heart health here is dietary nitrate. Leafy greens are among the highest natural sources of nitrates in the food supply. When consumed, nitrates convert to nitric oxide in the body, a molecule that signals arterial walls to relax and widen, reducing blood pressure and improving blood flow. Research published by the American Heart Association links increased leafy green intake to stronger cardiovascular benefits than other fruit and vegetable groups, including a 12 to 26% lower risk of cardiovascular disease in people eating the highest amounts. They are also dense in vitamin K, which plays a role in arterial calcification prevention, and in folate, which supports healthy homocysteine levels, an often overlooked cardiovascular risk marker. Raw spinach in a salad, lightly sautéed kale, blended into a smoothie. The nitrate content survives most preparation methods. What erases it quickly is boiling in large amounts of water and discarding the liquid. That cooking habit, common in many households, drains the very compounds that made the vegetable worth eating in the first place. Olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil is one of the most studied single foods in cardiovascular research. The Mediterranean diet draws much of its documented heart protection directly from olive oil's central role in daily cooking. The oil is cold-pressed from whole olives without heat processing. That distinction matters because heat and chemical extraction degrade the polyphenols, particularly oleocanthal, a compound with anti-inflammatory properties comparable in mechanism to ibuprofen at low doses. The monounsaturated fat content, predominantly oleic acid, helps lower LDL cholesterol while preserving or raising HDL cholesterol, a profile consistently associated with reduced cardiovascular risk. A Mediterranean diet supplemented with extra virgin olive oil reduced the risk of major cardiovascular events by approximately 30% compared to a low-fat control diet in the landmark PREDIMED trial. That number is cited frequently. What gets cited less is that the benefit was specific to extra virgin, not refined olive oil, a meaningful difference in polyphenol concentration. Refined olive oil, light olive oil, and blended products labeled pure olive oil have lower polyphenol concentrations. They share the fat profile but lose much of the anti-inflammatory and endothelial benefit. Most people buying olive oil at mid-range supermarkets are buying refined or blended versions without realizing the cardiovascular gap. Legumes, lentils, black beans, chickpeas, kidney beans, they all belong to the same botanical family and share a cardiovascular profile that is unusually dense for foods at this price point. Legumes carry soluble fiber, which works on cholesterol the same way oat beta-glucan does, alongside plant protein, folate, magnesium, and potassium. The fiber-protein combination creates a slow digestion dynamic that helps stabilize blood sugar, reduce LDL cholesterol, and moderate blood pressure over time. A Harvard-led study published in late 2024 found that replacing red and processed meat with plant proteins, particularly nuts and legumes, was among the most impactful dietary shifts for reducing cardiovascular disease risk. Black beans in particular carry a high concentration of folate and antioxidants alongside the fiber and magnesium load. Cooked from dried beans delivers more fiber and fewer additives than canned versions, but canned beans rinsed of their liquid perform nearly as well in studies measuring cardiovascular outcomes. The main argument against legumes in some dietary conversations is the carbohydrate content. That argument tends to ignore the fiber structure. Legumes behave metabolically far closer to vegetables than to bread, and the populations eating them in highest quantities consistently show lower rates of cardiovascular disease. Whether that reframes how you think about beans or not is something the comment section tends to work out on its own. Green tea. Green tea is not a supplement. It is not an extract. It is dried and slightly heat-treated leaves steeped in water. And the simplicity of that process is part of why its cardiovascular effect took so long for Western nutritional research to take seriously. The active compounds are catechins, a specific family of flavonoids most concentrated in green tea compared to black or white varieties. The most studied catechin is EGCG, which reduces LDL oxidation, lowers inflammation markers, improves endothelial function, and appears to modestly reduce blood pressure over consistent use. A large review from the American College of Cardiology identified green tea consumed without added dairy, sugar, or sweeteners as one of the foods with clear documented cardiovascular benefit. The leaves are briefly steamed or pan-fired after harvest to prevent full oxidation, which preserves the catechin content. Black tea undergoes full oxidation and loses most of its catechins. The two teas are made from the same plant but arrive at very different cardiovascular profiles. Matcha, made by grinding whole green tea leaves into powder, delivers roughly 3 times the catechin concentration of steeped leaf tea because you consume the entire leaf rather than an infusion. Whether the stronger dose translates to proportionally stronger cardiovascular benefit or simply a more concentrated version of the same effect is still being studied. Drink it plain, drink it consistently, and the data suggests it earns its place in this list.